Hi, welcome to Spotlight, your story, their lifeline, a mother-to-mother podcast. I'm Mimi.
And I'm Dobra, and together we are your hosts. In this mother-to-mother podcast, you will meet women sharing their stories of struggle, triumph, and hope. Our aim is to ensure that no woman ever feels alone.
Through their brave storytelling, these women become lifelines for others on their own journeys. So join us as we dive into the incredible stories that inspire and empower.
Welcome to Spotlight, where your story becomes a lifeline.
Thank you to our media sponsor, Aaron Coleman, who runs a media and video production company and helped us create our Spotlight promo video. Amongst a range of services such as graphic design, website building, and corporate photography, he works with some amazing charities to create incredible videos for their charity campaigns. Yes, he has produced videos for charities such as Keren Shabbos of London, Boine Olam, J-Teen, Seed, and a whole lot more. So, if you're listening to this and are involved in a charity organisation anywhere across the UK that is planning a fundraising campaign and need video content to help your story, you should be reaching out to discuss. You can reach him by emailing aaron at ronmedia.co.uk or by phone 077 46 670 691. Welcome to Spotlight. We are so excited to have Remington Shalvi Friedman, all the way from Golders Green.
Well, originally South Africa, but now living in Hendon.
Oh, I love the accent. So we're so excited. Thank you so much for coming. Do you want to give us a little introduction? You have got the most incredible story of going through a very big challenge, but with such resilience. And I'm sure you're going to inspire many, many, many women here today. So thank you. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Can we have like a little intro? Because you've got lots of hats.
Yes, I do have lots of hats. I grew up in South Africa, as I said before, moved to Israel when I was in my early 20s and got married to a rabbi who...
He was already a rabbi?
He was on his way to getting smicha. He's a Baal Tshuva. And we had at the beginning of the story, I guess, we had 3 kids. We now have 4, thank God. And I work in Hasmonean. I'm a Kodesh teacher, and I work in Aish as a Kirov Rebbetzin, and I run an organization in Jewish Futures that does high-level Torah education for women. And I'm a Yoetzet Halacha, which means that I work with the women in the community to help advise them and guide them in matters relating to women's health and fertility.
Wow, that is incredible. Yeah, that's a lot of things. And you had time to come here today.
Well, you guys made time for me, so I appreciate that.
Well, we're very grateful. So let's dive straight in to when
did the story actually start?
When's the story? So yeah, you were pregnant.
So I was pregnant with my 4th child.
Yeah. And
I guess the story starts around Purim time that year. I was 28 weeks pregnant. I mean, the story begins a little bit earlier because at my 20-week ultrasound, at my 12-week ultrasound, I happened to have a Jewish doctor who was doing the ultrasound at UCLH, and I said to her,
you're in England, right?
I was in England, yeah. And I said to her, don't you think that in England they only do 2 ultrasounds, like the routines, 12-week and 20-week, and in Israel they'll do so many more. And we had this whole conversation about which one's better and how to do it. And then at the end, as she's typing up the notes, she says to me, oh, actually you're in luck. Your 3rd child's birth weight was small. My third son is Pitsy, which is funny because my husband and I are both very tall. He's just like a small dude. And don't tell him I said that publicly.
Cute and petite.
Yes, he thinks he's very tall. He feels tall. So she said, but because of that, you actually qualify for more, what they call like sizing ultrasounds, growth scans throughout the pregnancy. And I was like, I'm all for scans. I'm one of those people. I'm like, the more scans, the better. I'll come for my growth scans. So that's really the hashkacha of this, is that the condition that my son was born with, his heart condition, you can't pick it up at the 20-week ultrasound. It can only be picked up later on. In fact, once it was already caught, one of the doctors went back to the 20-week ultrasound just out of curiosity to be like, could it have been? And she was like, no, you can't see a thing on that 20-week ultrasound. So it would have been entirely missed, which is just incredible hashkacha. That's what happened.
Mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Is that because, assuming they had to have surgery?
Yes, because he needed surgery as soon as he was born, and children who, if you aren't made aware of that beforehand, so things can, develop negatively before you realize that this baby's actually very, very ill.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So that's like a personal miracle on its own.
Yeah. So then at around 28 weeks, I had another ultrasound, and I actually decided to bring my then 10-year-old daughter with. I thought it would be cute. She'd see the scan and see that, all the things and the baby's head and head. And we went to the ultrasound, and the doctor just kept scanning the heart. And she said to my daughter's like, this is so boring. You told me we'd see the baby's fingers and head and toes, and all I'm seeing is this, the 4 little squares, quadrants. And I said to the doctor, like, is everything okay? And she was like, maybe it is, maybe it isn't. I don't know. I think you should go see a specialist. It might be fine. I'm not sure. And she she was very passive about it. She wasn't like, oh my gosh, there's something terribly wrong. She said like, I'm going to book you in to see a Great Ormond Street specialist, and we'll see what happens.
Was that good? Like, did you appreciate that looking back, that it was vague and not just a shock, especially if it's in front of your daughter?
Well, more than that, it was actually vague. Meaning that could have been missed on the scan. Again, my understanding is once a doctor looked at it later on, a different doctor said she would have missed it at the 28-week scan too. She said that doctor was just being overly cautious.
Again, miracle number 2.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I went home and I didn't fully really clock into what that meant. I was like, she's probably being overly cautious. I've had scares before in pregnancy, so I was like, okay, whatever.
So you weren't overly emotional, anxious, or anything about it?
No.
With it?
And then I went to this scan at Gosh, and obviously it just so happened that I had
So Gosh is in Great Ormond Street.
Great Ormond Street Hospital has a clinic in UCLH where they see high risk pregnancy babies.
Okay.
Where the baby's at risk. So I had get into this room. It just so happened that obviously I had a kid with COVID at the time.
Oh no.
So this was 2022, beginning of 2022. So my husband stayed home with the kid. So I came alone to this appointment. And I texted my husband. I was lying still in the middle of the ultrasound. I texted him. I said, there is something very wrong with our baby's heart. I don't know what.
Wow.
And then they pulled me into a side room. They were amazing. In retrospect, I mean, you're giving someone really scary news. They had a nurse there and a whole bunch of staff who were all around there. I mean, even the ultrasound, there were 8 people in the room. It was a very, intimidating thing. And they said to me, there's something very wrong with your baby's heart and he's going to probably need heart surgery as soon as he's born.
What were your initial thoughts like just then? How did you react?
So my first thought was, my father's a doctor.
Oh,
and
that's useful.
Yeah. Yes. And I was just like, I'm not equipped to. I need an adult in the room to process this with me. Where are the grown-ups? So I was trying to call my father to put him on loudspeaker so that at least he could be there. At least he's in Israel, but on some level with us. But at the time, my sister-in-law was giving birth in Israel, so he was busy with a labor and birth situation in Israel with my sister-in-law, and I was on the family WhatsApp group being get dad to call me now. I need to call dad now.
This was during the actual meeting.
During the meeting, and then the Gosh nurse kept saying to me, "Can you put down your phone so we can talk to you?" And I was like, "No, I need my father.
Yeah, I need an adult."
Where is he?
Yes, exactly.
You told them that your father's a doctor.
Yes,
and you're trying to.
Yes.
Okay.
But I think with advanced, at the end of the day, I realized through this process that you need to really be a cardiologist to understand hearts. It's all very well, whatever specialist he was, he could only support at least in a theoretical level. It's just the level of neonatal cardiology is so specific and so complex that there's only so much. Being a doctor doesn't do all that much.
He probably could understand a little bit more than you.
Yes,
which is a help.
Yes.
But you were also alone.
I was alone.
How was that?
I totally fell apart. They told me that I would, the baby would be taken straight away to be given a hormone to keep the duct open before the surgery, and I wouldn't be able to breastfeed the baby, wouldn't be able to eat anything or feed at all until the surgery. They told me I probably would be able to have a natural birth, so that was a relief because I've had only natural births until then.
Right.
So
you were really, really alone.
Yes.
In this
absolutely
situation.
And just totally falling apart. And then I went home, took the tube home,
You took the tube?
Yes.
Wow.
It was good processing time. I needed to not have my phone and not Google things and just be alone and just kind of work through on some level in my head. And I got home, and in the way I was talking to my husband and crying on the phone and trying to explain to him what the doctor said. And then I got home and he was like, "I'm speaking at Asia Nottingham. I need to leave now." And he got in the car and he left to Nottingham. And I was like, wait, I just told you that our baby needs heart surgery when he's 3 days old. Where are you going? Like, we need to like process this together. And he was like, no, we'll process it. I have a commitment, which was an interesting dynamic.
He was worried, or he didn't show that at that point?
I think that he wasn't worried because he wasn't pregnant. Mm-hmm. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Meaning for him, this was something that was so theoretical, like there will be a baby and there will be a surgery, but that's like so far off. Whereas for me, I was like, no, this is my baby. And this is something which I'm going through. One of the things which to me was one of the challenges of this whole process was like kind of separating out, this is mine, but it's not mine. It's really the baby's experience, and it's our experience as a couple. And with a lot of these, like, you know, fertility and baby issues, sometimes it's very hard to figure out where there's me and where there's us and where there's you, and kind of, you know, make space for all of those needs, if you know what I mean.
So you and your husband really process this quite differently.
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So how did you get through that?
I think that he kept saying to me, Shelby, we don't want two of you. That would be a lot. Like, it's good that you're processing your way, and it's good that I'm not processing it your way, because then I can support you and I can be there for you without... I'm a highly, highly emotional person, and I was a wreck.
Welcome to womanhood.
Yes, right. And I was pregnant, right?
And you're pregnant.
Yes, exactly. And my husband's a very theoretical person, and which often men are. And, you know, and I think that we both learned to respect each other's journey and each other's process, you know. At a certain point, I said to him, like, are you talking to anybody? And he's like, do I need to talk to people? I'm like, I've spoken to like 50 people to process this.
It's just
Who
different.
have you spoken to?
Yeah. He obviously didn't need that.
Yes, absolutely. Right.
And sometimes you just need a woman's shoulder to cry on.
Right.
Who will get you emotionally.
Absolutely. I remember before this, I actually had a miscarriage. It was in the middle of COVID at some point. And, you know, we were all like social distancing. It wasn't like the beginning of COVID. It was like a little bit further on. And I came home and I was just like, I went to a neighbor's house and I was like, I just want to sit with another woman. I was like, I know there's COVID and I know there's rules, but like, come outside and sit outside your front door with me and just like cry with me and talk to me, because I really wanted to experience this as like with a woman, with another woman, because it felt like such a female experience, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Wow.
And all the procedures that go with it.
Yes.
With the miscarriage. Yeah. It's just
absolutely
only a woman could really understand.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I'll add in one more point. I think that, you know, sometimes it's you know, the go-to is to say, why aren't you supporting me in what I'm going through?
I can imagine it feels like that.
Yes.
At times when they're just not, they're just
it.
they're just on.
You feel that you think
page.
they're not getting it.
Yeah.
But they're just processing it differently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. 100%.
As long as there's communication.
Yeah. Exactly. And communication about your processing and communication about your needs.
Yeah.
Of like, you know, trying to really make space for each other.
I think that's really important and really validating, because so many times we can go through any challenges and sometimes we just feel like they're just not getting it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's just different. And sometimes you just need to outsource.
Yeah,
a little bit.
Well, I think that one of the challenges, I think, was then figuring out how to, and this was another interesting space that we disagreed, was figuring out who to tell, right? You know, who we're going to tell what to. I know sometimes people keep these things very private, and some people are very public and they start, you know, WhatsApp groups, and people are saying Tehillim on WhatsApp groups. And, you know, each couple is going through a nisayon has to navigate not just their personal preference, but as a couple, their preference of like, how are we going to tell people? And what are the ramifications of that?
Are you talking about family members, or because you're such public figures, you know the world?
I think both, yes. The family was easy because we share a lot with our families, and there was like an obvious, you know, thing that we told the whole family, and everybody was, you know, calling. I'm one of a very large family and I had all the siblings on the phone all the time, which thank God was very special.
This was at the same time as your sister.
My sister-in-law having a baby, yes.
So that's probably like also a lot of different kind of...
Yes. Well, my brother, whose wife had just had a baby, one of the siblings I'm probably closest to. So he was very torn, because he on the one hand had just had a baby, and on the other hand, he was really almost going through what I was in a very, you know, emotional kind of way. My husband's from a very small family. He has one sibling and the way they do things is much less, volatile and much less emotion. So it was also navigating that and sharing with both sides in a different tone, with different amounts of information, just because of the dynamic of the relationship.
So it's like the classic marriage of like opposites attract.
Yes, exactly. Yes.
Wow.
100%. But then the community, we're both very public figures. People know us. And we actually wanted to share this with people. Like, my first instinct was like, why do people keep this a secret? I didn't want it to be a secret. I didn't want it to be a secret because it was enough of a burden already to then feel like, and I have to not tell people, felt like very overwhelming.
And you were only 28 weeks. You
Correct.
still had quite a while to go.
Yes. So somebody very wise said to me, but you do realize whoever you share it to will feel like they're then allowed to like check in on you and ask you questions. So you have to just be aware of the fact that whatever you share will be then, people will then share back.
Yeah, they'll want to know. They'll want to know how's it going.
Yeah.
And what.
Yeah, absolutely. But we actually decided to tell people. We're very open about it. In fact, we got a psak that we should tell people what the gender was of the baby so people could daven for him as Ubar Ben Shalva. We told people we're having a boy and then he would need heart surgery. But we framed it in such a way that also said, and please, give us, space to process, but, we appreciate your love and concern. And a few people during the days leading up to surgery, like, should we start to heal in WhatsApp groups? And I was like, absolutely not. That to me as a public figure felt like way too exposed.
Yeah.
Even on a work WhatsApp group that my husband and I are both on the day of the surgery, he posted something on the group like, please daven. And immediately I private messaged him. I was like, you have to take that down. And he's like, why? These are our friends. These are our colleagues. And I'm like, since you messaged that me in the last 4 minutes, 5 people have private messaged me. That's why you have to take it down. Because
private message asking
to say like, how are you? Can I do anything to help? And again, very good intentions. But I was like, I'm standing in the middle of a hospital. My baby's about to go in for an 8-hour surgery, which we're skipping to that part of the story, which we'll get to.
But you just needed your space.
I'm like, just don't message me. Yeah. Which some people do want to be messaged, and different people obviously have different experiences. But that was like, to me, that was like, you have to take that down. He was like, I have to share it. These are my friends and colleagues. And that was also like an interesting moment for us.
Yeah. But let's just backtrack a little bit. So you found out that your baby needs to go for heart surgery as soon as it's born.
Yes.
And I'm guessing you probably went for a second opinion.
No,
second
we
opinion.
really trusted, Great Ormond Street are the best of the best. And they sent us for another scan with another doctor a couple of weeks later just to confirm the diagnosis. Actually, the second diagnosis was a bit worse than the first one.
So they knew exactly what to do when it wasn't like they were unsure in any way. They knew exactly what was going to happen as soon as the baby. So was that
basically
reassuring?
There's like an arch that comes up from the aorta. It's called the aortic arch from the heart to supply blood flow to the entire lower body, the gut, the legs, the everything. And his was like a third of the size of what it should be. The only question was, could they repair it from the side without having to do full-on open heart surgery, or do they need to like cut him open down the middle and do full-on heart surgery? That was the question after the first scan. And the second scan at around 32 weeks, they were like, no, this kid definitely needs full surgery.
Wow.
Like, we're going to have to reconstruct this arch. It's a mess.
There's a name to this?
It's called a hypoplastic aortic arch.
I knew some long names.
Complicated name.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
But let's talk about now the emotions, because I'm always the one who does all the emotions. You gave birth at what week?
38. They induced me at 38 weeks.
So from 28 to 38 weeks.
Yeah.
You knew. Was there any question that your baby wouldn't survive?
No.
You knew your baby would survive.
Yes.
So you just knew it was going to be complicated.
Yes.
And there would be a surgery and.
Yes, I think that I didn't understand. There were certain things. Look, Great Ormond Street was incredible. This was in the middle of COVID, like I said. So they had a Zoom call where all the potential parents who were going to come in around the same time got on a Zoom together. And a mother who'd been through that presented to us and spoke to us about her experience of having a newborn in Gosh. And they sent us a video of what it looks like to have the baby come out of heart surgery, which is like, on the one hand, absolutely terrifying. On the other hand, it made me feel like, okay, so I know what I'm getting into. The machine with the baby and the, 12 different pumps of different medicines and the heart and the thing and the face. I saw it all. So I felt like there was no surprises. And I got in touch with somebody who had a baby who had heart surgery at Gosh. And she gave me like all of these tips of things you should do and things you shouldn't do and what you should know. So I'm a planner by nature. So I felt like a lot of that, like preemptive planning and talking and figuring things out, was very helpful for me.
You felt prepared.
Yeah.
Very prepared.
I can imagine it wasn't an easy time, those 10 weeks.
No, absolutely not. In fact, I remember I called a Rebbitzin of mine in Israel a couple of days after the diagnosis. And I said to her, I feel like you hear all these stories about these heroes who have these horrible things happen to them and their children have horrible, whatever it is. And then they like turn their lives around and they like start a new charity, or they finish some amazing sefer, or they write a book, or they something, they like start saying Tehillim every day. So I'm generally, as I said earlier, a pretty overcommitted kind of person. And I do a lot. And I was pregnant. I said to her, I don't want to do more. I can't do more. And I can't do more, not because I feel like Hashem expects less from me or more from me, or just purely, this isn't like a spiritual consideration. This is a technical, I am burnt out to begin with. And now you're telling me my baby's going to have heart surgery. So I should like what? Become more, do this mitzvah more, that mitzvah more. I don't want to do any mitzvah more. I want to I'm so overwhelmed with my current reality. Plus now this daunting, future surgery. I can't handle this. And she said something very powerful to me. She said, so maybe what Hashem wants you to do is less. She said, maybe, obviously not, stop doing mitzvahs or whatever it was, but she said, maybe your nisayon is to take care of yourself, because I'm very good at forgetting to do that. Mm-hmm. And maybe your avoid in the next, the work that you to do on yourself in the next, couple months, as you said, 10 weeks, is not to like start a new chesed or but do chesed to you. Have an earlier night, take care of yourself, sleep more, rest more, do things that you enjoy, pick up a hobby that you haven't done for a while. So that to me was like such a mind shift.
That's very nice.
Yeah, sometimes we feel like doing more makes me better, but sometimes it's not true. Doing less can also make you in a better state. So one of the things that she also told me, which really helped me, was there's a medrash about the Jewish women in Egypt, that they were told that all the baby boys, were going to be thrown into the Nile and they would all die. And the Medrash talks about how the women went out into the fields and they gave birth to these babies who couldn't live in any way, shape or form outside of in real life back in Egypt. And they would leave their babies in the field. And the Medrash in an allegorical way describes how Hashem came and he fed them honey and milk and took care of them. And then these kids grew up and they went home and their mother says to them, who took care of you? And they said, I don't know, some man somewhere. And then when they went to the splitting of the sea and they saw the miracles at the sea, suddenly these children had this realization. They said, oh, wait, the God who's taking care of us now, he's the same God that took care of us out in the field. And they said, Ze keli vanvehu, this is my God. Oh my goodness, I can't believe this. And the messaging that she said to me was, sometimes you have to, just like those women in Egypt, you have to take this baby and you're going to hand it over to the doctors and you're going to hand this baby over to the people who know how to take care of the baby. All you can do is bring it to its birth, bring it to this moment of when it's coming into the world. And then you have to let Hashem take over and do the rest. And not that it was easy, and we'll talk about that when we get to the end, but that definitely conceptually really helped me to just say like, okay, my job is to love, nurture, and deliver this baby. And that's what I have to do now for the next 10 weeks. And what will be on the other end will be on the other end.
Wow, that was really, really beautiful.
Well, that was amazing that was a help for you. Did you ever daven that he will be born without this condition? You know how some people, they're told in pregnancy, your child has this or your child has that, and then they're born and they're actually fine. Did you daven that would?
No, I'm a rationalist, and I felt like what Hashem wanted from me was to go through this, not to change this. I don't know. No.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So, was there anything that you did other than going to this Rebbitzin? Was that literally your way of coping and getting through? Was that at the beginning of the 28 weeks and that just helped you get through till 38?
Yes.
Was there anything else that you did to help you get through that really hard 10 weeks?
Not really.
Other than educate yourself.
Educate myself, share with people who I, trusted and cared, I knew cared about me.
Yeah.
I stocked my fridge and freezer obsessively with food.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
You created that support.
Yes.
And for afterwards as well.
Yes.
Which is really smart.
Yes. My parents live in Israel, so I told my father he had to come for the baby. And then we realized, because he's a doctor, because of COVID, he wouldn't be allowed into anything. Like no one was allowed in any of the wards, in any of the anythings.
That's just like another element
It was bizarre. It was just crazy.
Did you start a hobby?
Did I start a hobby? No, but I started to read for pleasure again, which I hadn't done for years.
That's good. You were taking care of yourself.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And so then my mother came, because it made more sense if he wasn't going to be in the ward with me. So she came. She was there for my labor, which was very special. She was there for all of my children. And then we actually didn't see each other. She came for 2 weeks and spent almost all the time at home with my children. Because, I had 3 children at home.
Which is a support in itself.
And yes, because my husband and I have no family here. We don't have, aunts and uncles, cousins, like nobody. So that was really, really challenging, was trying to figure out who is going to feed these kids, and my husband and I barely saw each other. Also, because we were switching off from the hospital because someone had to be home with the kids.
Did you have scans the whole time at this point? You had to go into hospital every single...
Oh, it's an interesting question. I had a couple. I can't remember how many. It was at a certain point they were like, okay, so we'll see you when you give birth. And I was like, wait, well, shouldn't we be having scans every week? And they were like, no, we know your baby needs heart surgery. We don't need to keep scanning and keep reassuring ourselves.
So you weren't needing to find support looking after your children at home? Some people who have to always go in.
No.
So the lead up was pretty regular.
Yeah, that was bizarre. It was just I was just a regular person having a baby, and I went to scream sometimes, I'm not a regular person having a baby.
Right.
This is a very sick baby I'm having.
Right. Wow.
That must have been quite hard, sitting in the room there with lots of other women that are pregnant, waiting to have your scans, and you're sitting here thinking you don't even know what's going on.
Yes. Well, also if you leave the hospital, there's all these people who've just given birth who are walking out with their babies. That was very hard. Because every time I was I teared up when I remembered, I'm not going home with this baby.
Yeah. That must have been really challenging.
Yeah.
So then 38 weeks happened, and you got induced?
I got induced. They wanted to induce me. Which, the pros and cons of induction are beyond the scope of this podcast. But I gave birth at 42 weeks and I was induced at 38. So my body was not ready to have a baby. So I was in labor for 36 hours.
That's a really long
which
time.
was a lot. And I really wanted to have I didn't want to have an epidural. So
you didn't want to have one?
Didn't want to. So for majority of that time, I was on the craziest high levels of Pitocin, the induction medicine, and no epidural. I was mummish climbing the walls. There is absolutely no words to describe the excruciating pain. And I was by the end I was delirious. I remember at a certain point there was my husband and my mother and the doctor and everybody in the room, and I just needed space. I went to the bathroom just to be alone, just to labor quietly somewhere. And I remember pleading with this baby, being I know I'm scared too, you're scared, but you have to come out because we have to face this. We can't sit in this labor ward for the next 5 days. You need to come out, and I promise you we'll do this together, and we love you and Hashem loves you, and we're going to take care of this, but you have to be born, begging the baby to come out, which was whatever. It was just, I guess, a way of coping with it.
Did you feel a whole lot better after you had that moment?
I guess no, because he didn't listen and he didn't come out then for another hours and hours afterwards.
How long later
did he come? Wow. He was comfortable.
So
yes. And at the end of hours of surgery.
Do you think that was a subconscious anxiety maybe for what was going to be?
No. In retrospect, his hand was in the wrong. He was born with his hand over his mouth.
Oh, okay, that really wasn't.
He actually wasn't engaging properly.
Okay,
that was the problem.
So it wasn't to do with you.
No, it wasn't. It was just
because sometimes when something's happening, then something's going to be happening.
No.
And there's that subconscious
right.
anxiety.
So that's the whole thing. Yeah. I was so emotionally, spiritually, mentally ready to deliver this baby, and it just wasn't coming. It was wait. In the story, when you get beyond your whatever's your blockages, then you just have a baby. And I was I am beyond the blockages. I'm ready to rock and roll. And he just didn't come for hours and hours and hours. And then eventually at the end, so how when you give birth, there's the midwife in the room and maybe a doctor. They're oh, we can see the head coming. You're nearly there. They were 12 people in the room. They were cardiologist specialists and pediatric specialists and this specialist and that specialist, a room full of people. It was this whole, and then all of them were standing there going oh, you're nearly there, you're nearly there. And I remember I had a Muslim midwife, and she was like, "You're nearly there." And I turned to her and I said to her, pointed to my husband, I said, "Get him to do something. He's been sitting on the couch for a day and a half. Surely you can find something for him worthwhile for him to do." And she said, it was such a powerful moment. She said to me, "My lovey," she said, "he is praying. You can't underestimate the powers of his prayer."
Wow.
It's like such a reality check. And then I said, "Well, obviously he's not praying hard enough because I'm still in labor and I'm still pregnant." And then I turned to all of these doctors. Like I said, I was delirious. I hadn't eaten or slept for 36 hours. In like the most insane levels of pain. And I turned to all the doctors and I was like...
And you were still so stubborn not to have an epidural?
No, at the end, they actually said to me, they were like, "If you don't take an epidural, we're just going to turn off the Pitocin," because I was in so much pain that they were like, "We can't actually allow you to continue." So I had a half dose of epidural. So then right at the end, I said to all the doctors, I was like, "I'm so disappointed." I said, "Think about your collective education. We have doctors and midwives and nurses and pediatricians and all of you in the room, and none of you can deliver my baby. You're all waiting for me to do it. Like, isn't that pathetic?" So
I love what you say, like in these moments of time, like...
I think I kept everybody entertained. My mother was mortified. Time. She was like, "I'm telling you, she's not like this always."
Wow. Oh my goodness. Oh wow. And the baby was born.
And then the baby was born. He was born at like 11:57
a natural
p.m.
Natural birth.
Okay. But right at the end, I kept saying to the midwife, "He's going to be born on the 26th," because it was like getting closer and closer to midnight. She's like, "No, this baby's going to be born on the 25th. I'm like, "No, it's going to be the 26th. He's like, "It's going to be the 25th. And then he was born at 11:57. And after he was born, she said, "11:57, I've told you." And I was like, I remember vaguely saying to her, "I'm sure you stopped the clock because I'm sure he was born after 12 o'clock.
Oh, you really did keep them entertained.
I did, yes.
Oh, wow. Gosh.
And at that point, so I held him for just like a couple of seconds. Like I could give him like a little bit of a cuddle.
And he looked exactly
normal, healthy baby, which is often with this specific heart. Some babies are born blue or whatever with different heart conditions. This heart condition, they're not. Which again I was prepared for, but a lot of people asked me, they were like, "So when he was born, did he look, whatever?" And I'm like, "No, not with this. He was totally fine. He looked and it seemed like a totally healthy baby," which is also why often this condition is actually missed at the beginning, because this baby seemed fine. But then I gave him a little quick hug, and my husband took him to the ICU with the specialists.
And that was it. You were alone. And
then I was alone.
We'll be right back to this episode. Hi, I'm Danielle.
And I'm Aviva, and we are the founders of Mother to Mother, an organization that supports and empowers women on their motherhood journeys. We offer a wide range of services to make sure that every mother can thrive, from emotional support services to mother and baby groups, practical help, health information, community kitchen, and more.
Mother to Mother builds communities of women to support each other. By tuning into our podcast, you have joined the Mother to Mother family today. Welcome, and enjoy the rest of this episode.
And I have to be honest, I was so tired that I don't even think I cared. I just fell asleep.
They needed to put the baby on oxygen or something like that?
It's a good question. No. Sometimes babies in his position need oxygen. It depends on, the various different elements of the heart. But the other thing that they need to do is, again, my understanding of hearts is like pretty limited, but in utero, the baby has a duct which is open inside the heart, which like circumvents the regular functioning of the heart. Within a couple hours or days, I don't know what it is, of the baby being born, it closes. As long as the duct was open, he could function on his own. The second the duct closed, he was at risk of dying. So they needed to put him on a special hormone to trick the body into thinking that he was in utero.
Amazing that they have.
So that, yeah.
But obviously, if somebody is going through this, then they'll look into their own medical. They'll look into it medically themselves.
Meaning, we're talking, as I said, we're talking about like the most specialist of specialists who explain this. But one of the risks on the special hormone, which is very, very expensive, very special hormone, is that sometimes the baby forgets to breathe because it thinks it's in utero. So they have to monitor it like every split second on lots of machines and lots of everything to make sure that the baby's breathing okay.
So you knew that this was going to happen because of Hashgacha Pratis, divine providence that he had this heart condition. But for parents who don't know about this and their baby is born completely normal, how long later could it take after birth when they realize, there's something really wrong?
So I'm not a specialist, and I really, I can't answer like from a medical perspective. My understanding, I spoke to a pediatrician about this during pregnancy, actually, to like try and understand. And she said some babies they would pick up when they check whatever they could pick it up at birth. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they don't pick it up at birth. Often they don't for this specific heart condition. And then within like a day or two, the baby collapses because their gut is not getting enough blood flow to provide for the digestion of food, for the functioning, for the liver, for the everything. I don't exactly know what. She said she sees babies in Great Ormond Street who arrive 2 days old, who have collapsed and who are septic, and they don't know why, and they have to go back to the beginning again and start figuring it out until they realize it's their aortic arch.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I'm just asking because it's just such a miracle.
Yeah, absolutely. That we came in prepared and knowing what to expect, and he could, and meaning as hard as it was, the most painful thing was that I couldn't breastfeed him, and I'm a big breastfeeder. And
I was actually going to bring that up.
Right, and at the same time, that was the clincher. That really is what would have ultimately caused a lot of damage to his body if I had breastfed him.
Really?
Yeah, because again, the issue was the gut and whether it can digest food.
How were you afterwards? How long did it take you to recover?
I slept for a couple hours. I don't remember how long. And then I woke up, and again, this like jarring moment of, what in the world? There was like a nurse who was like, let me explain to you how to express colostrum. And again, as being a big breastfeeder who've like latched my kids immediately, I was like, wait, what? And anyone who's had a preterm baby or anything knows this experience. I actually called a friend who'd had a baby at 20-something weeks, bawling my eyes out, standing with like a syringe, being like, am I actually doing this? And she kind of mentored me through it and gave me chizuk and encouraged me and told me, that it was worth it and I would get through it on the other end, which was very, very helpful. And then at a certain point, I was allowed to go see him. But he was attached to, oh my gosh, like so many things. And they had actually made his central line, sometimes, I don't know when or what or how, but they had made his central line coming out of his belly button, which means that it was very precarious and like delicate. So I couldn't even hold him properly. Like, like skin to skin, there was like almost none of that. I could only hold him like rocking a baby, type thing, because it didn't affect his belly button. Everyone was very worried that I would shift the central line, and because it can obviously be a bit, gory. So that was really, really tough. It was like just, he was in the NICU at UCLH before they transferred him to Gosh the next day. And there were like lots of pitsy little babies in incubators. And he was like a Gesundter baby. He was born 3.2 kilos. And it's so huge compared to the others. And I couldn't even like it happens to be, I know not everyone has this experience, but for me, they didn't discharge me until they discharged him. So we could be discharged together, which was amazing. And we both went straight to Great Ormond Street together. And they also were amazing. They put me into a cubicle with only women who didn't have their babies with them. So I wasn't like with other people with their babies. But that was like devastating, even just rethinking those moments of like sitting in the hospital bed and being like, why am I, where did he go? Like, that was very hard. And I couldn't be there all the time because I just had a baby. If you have a sick baby in hospital, you want to be there every second of every day. But I was like, 12 hours post-birth, and I was like a mess, and I'd been through a 36-hour labor, and I was in no position to just sit in a hospital. That was really, really hard. And again, COVID, nobody could visit. So my mother was dying to see her grandson that she'd come, and she hadn't seen him. So then they had the specialist team called the CATS team, maybe special ambulance people who come in with like, normally if you got an ambulance, it's like a paramedic who takes you in the ambulance. The CATS are like 3 doctors, fully trained, full doctors who take the baby. And it takes them like an hour to unplug him from all the machines at UCLH, to plug him into the machines at the ambulance, and then plug him back into the thing, and then plug him back into Gosh. It took ages. But as they arrived, I called my mother and I was like, quickly get in an Uber and come to Gosh, because as they take him out of the NICU and down the lift, you can see him. We like tricked the system, you know what I mean?
Wow.
So she came, and he was in this like huge machine with a million things. So she actually came with my daughter, and it was very special. And we came in the lift together, and they like gave us a few minutes, and she gave him a bracha. And that was really, really beautiful, was to be able to like just have those couple moments together.
That probably gave you a real boost.
Yes.
At that time.
Yes. I think that it, especially in those like, from when he was born until like he was home, my mentality was very much like just grabbing onto the special moments, because there were so many things that were so disappointing and so sad and so overwhelmingly out of control. And then there were like these small things of like, okay, we got a moment with your safta, and we got a moment with, you know, whatever it was.
And you were just after birth.
Yeah.
And you're walking around.
Yeah.
You're going in ambulances, and that's very overwhelming for somebody that's just after birth, hormones flying all over the place, milk probably starting to come in.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that was really, really hard was that, you know, when you have a baby, at the end of the day, you'll have like a pregnancy with this belly, and then you give birth to a stranger. Like, newborn babies are very unfamiliar too. Even though you carry them for 9 months, when they're born, you're like, I don't know you, I don't know your routine, and we're going to have to get to know each other. And I was like committed to sitting in this hospital once he was already at Gosh for this stranger while I have 3 very beloved children at home who I'm not with, who need their mommy. And that felt like almost like a conflict of interest. Like, part of me just wanted to like leave him there and go be with my older children. You know, I feel like bad to say that because I've spoken to people who are the opposite, are like, how could you even leave the hospital when you have a child in hospital? When you have children at home, then how can you go to the hospital when you have children at home? You know, and you just feel like I can't be in the right place. Like, wherever I am, it's the wrong place.
This is conflicting.
Yeah. And, you know, I spoke to somebody who was like, well, you're meant to be at X. And I'm like, don't tell me that. I'm meant to be everywhere at the same time. Like, wherever I am, it's where I am. I don't think that, you know, good intentions, someone said to me, but you're just meant to be at the hospital. Don't worry, your kids will be fine. I'm like, no, I actually want to be home with my children, and that's also an okay thing to feel. And I'm going to go home and be with my kids and, you know, spend time with them.
So how long later did you actually go home to be with your children?
I gave birth on a Wednesday. I went home for the first time, Motzei Shabbos, overnight, and then went first thing Sunday morning back to...
So every day you were going back?
No, I had a room in Gosh, and I was very grateful. I was really grateful. I was like living on survival mode. Like, this was, it was such a blessing.
Was your husband able to?
So we took shifts. Yeah, we took shifts from it just so happened he had his heart surgery, Erev 3-day Yontiv.
Oh,
so
no.
Obviously. And that double bank holiday for the Jubilee. It was one of that year. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
So there was it was bizarre. But so it just so happened that it made sense logistically.
Just to make things a bit more complicated.
Yeah, so it made sense more logistically that I stayed for the 3-day Yontiv in hospital with him. So in retrospect, my husband didn't spend much time with him, especially in the ICU period.
And how old was he when?
Okay, so here's how it worked. So when he was 1 day old, he moved from UCLH to Gosh. And then there, you know, they did lots of ultrasounds, more scans and more tests and more scans and more discussions. And they gave us a date for surgery, when he was about 5 days old. They did the heart surgery, which was an 8-hour procedure, which was... we can talk about that. And then he was in ICU, like a special cardiac ICU for 4 days. They had him on high levels of morphine, and he was ventilated and whatever. And then it's amazing how tiny babies recover, because 4 days later he was in the regular ward again for another week or so, and then he came home. So he was about 3.5, 4 weeks old when we came home.
And you were with him that whole time, just on survival mode, just pumping.
Yes, pumping milk. That's exactly, because I couldn't breastfeed him. I had mountains of milk by the end because I was pumping every 3 hours, and then just putting in the freezer.
Were you allowed to feed the baby? Or was
That's exactly what I was going to ask.
Oh, you mean afterwards?
Yeah, were you allowed to feed the baby after the operation?
So after the surgery, so as I said, I'm a big breastfeeder. I was in the ICU, and I had a conversation with the nurses. Were very much like, our protocol is that you can't breastfeed until the baby's gut has been accustomed to food. So I cornered a consultant, and I said to him, like, what's the evidence? And we had a whole debate and a discussion. He said, you can breastfeed him for 2 minutes at the beginning of every feed, which was such a machaya. He said, it's fine, it won't make any medical difference. And once I had the consultant who said that, then every time any nurse said to me, what are you doing? I said, oh, this and this consultant, he said I can. That's kind of like that stamp of approval. And then everybody kind of left me alone, even though they were very confused by
so
why
what was your baby
him.
eating? Because if they can't breastfeed, then I can imagine
they have TPN, which is intravenous nutrients.
Right, so he wasn't really getting any milk.
He wasn't getting any milk. They would put a little bit. He was allowed 2 mils of milk every 2 hours in a syringe. So just to get the taste of milk. So we would put it on a dummy or something.
Just to get the taste of milk, and also to get the sucking skills as well.
No, I don't know. I don't think that was something they were.
He had a dummy later.
Yeah, he had a dummy.
Yeah, if he had a dummy, then he had good sucking skills.
Yeah. Exactly. But it was just the most incredible thing at that moment when I got to actually breastfeed him. That was just like...
So that was at 3 or 4 weeks?
That was 2 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I was scared I was going to break him because he still had like stitches down his half of his chest still a little bit of wires attached. And it was like, oh my gosh, I'm definitely going to break this baby. But just that feeling of like, and then he latched and it was just such a relief and it was just so incredible. We made it. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
So what happened when you got home at 3 or 4 weeks with him?
So I'm trying to remember.
Did you have appointments a lot?
Yeah. So he's going to be under a cardiologist for the rest of his life. They have to monitor various different things of his heart. He had checkups every 3 months or so, and now it's every year for the rest of his life until he's 18, and then afterwards every 3 years for the rest of his life.
And now he is a happy, normal, bubbly.
Thank God he
child.
Is 100%. The doctor said you would only know that he had heart surgery because you can see on his notes. If you do an echo, you can't see it on his.
He has a scar.
Notes. He has a scar. He has a big scar all the way down his chest. He's 2. Very often tell him, we say you have a special scar because the doctors fixed your heart. The other day he had a rash and he had to go to the GP, and on the whole way there he kept saying to my husband who took him to the doctor, he kept saying, we're going to the doctors to fix my heart. Because in his head, that's what you're going to doctors for, to fix hearts.
But I want to backtrack to that point that you were still in the hospital or even afterwards. Was there ever a crashing point? And how did you get through those times?
Yes,
if you did.
There were definitely a couple crashing points. So when he was a couple days old, he was 2 days old, I had him Wednesday night, so Shabbos afternoon in Great Ormond Street. It was Shabbos. My husband was home with the kids in Hendon. I was at Great Ormond Street, and we thought I had a deep vein thrombosis, a DVT in my leg, which can sometimes happen to women after long labours. It's like a blood clot.
Okay. In
your legs or whatever. It wasn't that, but they called an ambulance because Gosh doesn't have a ward that's for grown-ups. They only do babies. So they had to call an ambulance to pick me up from Great Ormond Street Hospital and take me to UCLH. Just like reliving this is so ridiculous. It was so like, you get to a point where you're like, okay, I've reached maximum and now more. It was like, what on earth? So they took me to Great Ormond. They took me on Shabbos afternoon to UCLH to check if I had a deep vein thrombosis and to do blood tests and stuff there. And I left my baby at Gosh, and I had absolutely no idea what to do. I was totally beside myself. And I got to say, don't go to UCLH emergency room, the A&E, on a Saturday afternoon. It was like me and a bunch of arrested drunk people. That was it. There was like also and a bunch of Meshuggahs. It was the craziest experience. And there were people like arguing with the police and the people arguing with the thing and people on a psych hold and everybody. And I was like little from me in my little ward being like, I need a breast pump. I need to pump milk. It's been 2 hours.
It's all about the pumping,
and then it was like my colostrum was like just coming through. And they gave me the thing and I needed to put in the fridge. And they were like, no, we can't put in the fridge. We only keep medicine in the fridge and this is food. And I was like, it's not food, it's medicine. They were like, no, it's food. I'm like, it's colostrum, it's medicine. And we had this huge argument. I was wailing and eyes out. Eventually they agreed to put in the fridge for me. I think that they just thought I was like just another nutter. But then Motzei Shabbos, my husband came to the hospital. I was discharged from UCLH and with a follow-up appointment to check for a DVT a couple days later. And we were in the middle of central London. We had a baby in Great Ormond Street who was waiting heart surgery. And it was like one of those, June Motzei Shabbos. It was like 11:30 at night. In the middle of central and a bunch of like crazy people out partying, and we trying to get an Uber home. I cannot describe the exhaustion and the emotional overwhelm, and I hadn't been home since I had the baby, and we just kept trying to book an Uber, and they kept cancelling. Booking an Uber, they keep cancelling. So normally it's a little bit annoying. This was like existentially, I'm not over dramatizing, just like I was just like broken. And at that point I remember sitting on the side of the street in the middle of UCLH just like wailing, just being like, I don't think I'm ever going to go home again. I think I'm going to see my kids. I can't, this is too much. And then luckily an Uber came and we came home and my mother gave me a cup of tea and sat with me and comforted me. But that was like rock bottom. That was just like, this is too hard. And actually just before then, the specialist had been into the hospital in Gosh to tell me they were also worried about the baby's valve of his heart. It was too small and he might need a valve replacement. And valve replacement means you have heart surgeries your whole life. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is just... So I was like worried about him and the valve and the heart surgery and the DVT and the hospital and no lift home and there was no way. And I was, oh my gosh, it was just crazy. Which at the end, Baruch Hashem, the valve fixed itself and please God, he won't need a valve replacement ever.
That sounds very dramatic and very challenging.
So that was the one rock bottom, and the other one was the surgery. So it was interesting. The day that in the ward where he was having his heart surgery, there was a little girl waiting for a heart transplant. So they have this thing called I don't know what it's called, like a Berlin heart or something, which is like an external heart, which these kids have if they've had heart failure, to keep them going until they have heart surgery. But they can live in Gosh for like months. This little girl had lived in Great Ormond Street Hospital for 8 months. And as in, you can't leave the ward because you're plugged into the wall. Like your heart is plugged into the wall. And she had like therapists who came, and her mummy came to visit, and her whatever came to visit. And it was the day of my baby's surgery, and I was absolutely freaking out because his surgery was delayed. It was delayed because the baby before had a complication in his surgery. And they told me 1 o'clock, and then it was 2 o'clock, and then it was 3 o'clock. And he was crying, and I was crying, and I was like beside myself. And the mother of this little girl came in, and she said, "Is everything okay?" And this is, again, a mother who'd been waiting for 8 months to have her baby. And I looked at her, and I couldn't bring myself to say, I'm frustrated that this is taking so long because it's 2 hours delayed. You just have this like moment of like reality check. But at the same time, yes, it was so hard for me. And just because somebody else is going through something 10 million times worse, it doesn't make what you're going through easy. No. And we took him into the surgery eventually. And we, again, that image of like giving up the baby in the fields, we gave him to the surgeon. And the surgeon said, "I hope this makes you feel a bit better." He said, "I do these surgeries all day, every day." Like, just understand what they added onto his heart. They added on like a graft to his heart of 4 millimeters. To save his life. We're talking about a tiny baby with a tiny heart, with a tiny defect that saved his life 4 millimeters wide. Like nothing. Right? Microsurgery.
That's all it needed.
That's all it needed, yeah.
And that was 8 hours.
Yes, well, yeah, there's lots of things I don't know what they do before and after. I don't look or know. Having it like cool down the body, and then they have to get the body onto like an external something because they, they shut down the medical stuff. Yeah, exactly.
It's so unbelievable what they're able to do nowadays.
So crazy.
It's insane.
And also realization that if he lived like 50 years ago, he probably wouldn't have made it.
Right.
Or almost certainly wouldn't have made it. Yeah. And then I also imagined these like 6 to 8 hours of baby and heart surgery of like, again, what do people do? They say Tehillim, and I went to sleep. I found a spot in a corner
during the surgery,
on the floor. I just needed to like ground myself literally on the floor somewhere where no one found me, in like some corner in the hospital. And I went to sleep, and I slept for most of the surgery. And there was like such, again, going back to like, for me, the theme of this pregnancy was like just taking care of me.
Yeah,
my husband didn't know where I was, and he was like, "Where have you been?" I'm like, "Asleep." Because again, he had these ideas of us like having a chavrusa together and learning. And I just like slept through the whole thing. It's like a coping mechanism, I think.
Yeah, I think you can cut yourself some slack.
Yeah, right.
Because you're how many days after birth? Right. After a really long birth, your body has gone through a trauma. Yeah. Birth is a trauma, and you're running around getting Ubers, and back and forth to hospital. Crazy. Just the most crazy.
So the one thing we knew on the day of his surgery, I said to my husband, "I want a homemade supper. I don't want to eat like takeout." So we called a friend of ours who we're very close to, and I said, "Can you make me supper?" And I called someone from Gift to deliver it. And they delivered dinner to us at the ward in Gosh, and we're sitting and eating. And that's when we got the call from the surgeon. And maybe the best phone call in my entire life. He called my husband's phone, and my husband just started crying on the phone. Thank you so much. Thank you for saving my baby."
This is when the men's emotion came in.
Yeah, that's the first time. Exactly. And he put up and he said he's made it to the other end. He's made it. He's like, the surgery's over. We can go see him. Just like, that absolute relief of like, we're at the other end of this. Yeah. It's been so many weeks anticipating and worrying and crying, and just like, we're there. We're on the other end.
Wow. Miracle, yeah.
It's really incredible. It's really unbelievable. And then how long was he in hospital afterwards?
Just about a week, something like that.
He just healed so quickly.
Yeah.
And when you look at him now, every time you look at him?
Yeah, every time I look at him, it's just like, this is our little miracle. Yeah. Absolute miracle. I think the other thing, which maybe my mother said to me, was that we're everybody was davening for him. And she said to me, like, just remember that those tefillahs and all of that davening was not just for that surgery. It's going to be for the rest of his life. Like, he's going to be carried on these tefillahs. Yeah. And you like feel that. Like, a lot of people on the streets will see him and be like, oh, this is the boy at Davenport. This is the kid, which is really special to share that.
Wow. So looking back, so how did you get through those weeks?
So there's a couple things. The first thing is that I feel like I was just so overwhelmed with, and it sounds very like holy, but it wasn't at the time, so overwhelmed with gratitude. Like all of these people, there were like dozens of them who were all spending hours and hours taking care of my baby for absolutely no good reason, just because, you know, they're good people. I can't, like the nurses, the ICU nurses who one-on-one taking care of my baby for 12 hours at a time. It was just overwhelmingly humbling to see. And they were doing things that I couldn't do and didn't understand and couldn't, you know, I was in charge of like weighing the nappies at the end of his things. That was my job. And everything else, these nurses took care of my babies for me. At the same time, I remember that the first night that he was out of the ICU, he was starving. He hadn't actually had he didn't get enough nutrients while he was in the ICU for whatever reason. And he was absolutely ravenous. And they have this like strict protocol of how much the baby can be fed after heart surgery because they're worried it's going to get some gut infection. So he was on the high risk protocol, and he screamed the entire night. He screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed and screamed. He would settle down for 20 minutes and start screaming. And eventually, I remember the nurse come in and saying to me, like, this was like, again, the first time I was in a room with my baby alone. Up until that point, there had always been a doctor or a nurse holding, and my baby was in an incubator on a bed with wires. This was the first time he was actually unattached, and I was holding him and caring for him.
Straight from surgery?
This was about 4 days after surgery, yeah.
Okay.
And at a certain point, a nurse came in and she was like, I think your baby's having like withdrawal from morphine. And I was like, no, this isn't withdrawal from morphine. This is a hungry baby. And she was like, how do you know? I'm like, this is my fourth child. I'm telling you, this is a hungry baby. Eventually, he fell asleep, I think from sheer utter exhaustion. As did I. And in the morning shift, the nurse came in and she was like, I heard you had a really tough night. And she said, I'm sure you wish you had a couple more hands on board like you did in the ICU. And I was like, are you kidding me? I got to care for my own baby and he was screaming in my arms for a change. And I was holding him. And like, if you contrast that with when he was crying on the ventilator and you couldn't even hear anything because there was a thing coming out of his mouth, and he was mine and I was holding him and caring for him. And it was the most incredible night of my life. And it was amazing. You know, that kind of mentality I tried to like grab onto. So we had one nurse who before his surgery, I said we barely could hold him because of his central line in his belly button. And she was like, let's bath him. And we washed his hair. And it was like, again, such a magical moment. So that's the one hand. On the other hand, I would say, I think that, you know, there were a couple mothers in the room in the same situation who just had their first babies. And he was my fourth. And I think that it was much harder for me than them because I knew what I was missing out on. There was so much mourning happening, you know, when I was like, but I should feed my baby and I should care for him and his siblings should come see him. My kids had never seen him before. They weren't allowed into the ward because of COVID. And there was so much like deep existential sadness of like, I just got cheated out of those 3 weeks of having a newborn baby. And you know, just the terror and the pain.
Yeah, it's a very precious time.
It's a very precious time, you know, and
but I think for the first time mothers as well, then it's just extra overwhelming. I mean, having a baby even for the first time, normally, just a baby that's healthy straight away, no surgeries, is overwhelming to begin with for a first mother. But then this added on.
Right, there were women in the ICU in the breastfeeding room who I was like explaining to them how to pump milk and how to express and how to whatever. And can you imagine if you just don't know and how often? And, you know, because I knew I was just mirroring what I would do if I had a baby. So it was kind of intuitive in terms of how much to have and what to do. But these women, can you imagine? Yes. Just going and just having no clue and no idea. And
it's COVID.
And there's no one else coming in.
So much harder.
Yeah.
Wow. But turning this around, so you really grabbed onto all those bits, those moments, those good moments, and just found happiness in them and just
but at the same time it was very, very hard, and there was a lot of crying, and there was a lot of mourning, and there was a lot of deep sadness, that I knew it was okay to be sad.
Yeah,
I knew it was okay to just, you know, I didn't feel guilty for, you know, because, you know, I was at the end of the day, please God, coming home with a, you know, a live, healthy baby. And that doesn't eradicate the horrifying trauma of the weeks and weeks in the lead up to that. And I think that there's so much, I speak to women who are going through similar, who've had, you know, babies have heart surgery, whatever it is. and just really making that space for them of saying, yes, it's awful. It's absolutely heart-wrenching. And looking at your baby in the ICU with his heart still open and he's attached to a million wires and things and medicines that you can't even pronounce, it's really heartbreaking. And it's no pun intended. And it's sad and it's frustrating and it's so vulnerable, and you're so vulnerable with these strangers who are taking care of your baby, the most vulnerable space that you can be in and he's in, and it's very, very confusing. I think the other thing that I have to say is that at the end of the day, this is his story, it's not mine. Because I didn't have heart surgery. I didn't have my insides cut up. I'm not the hero who went through that. That was all him. And at the same time, he's never going to remember it. It's just a scar on his body. And the story that's his story, I'm going to carry as a trauma for the rest of my life. And I'm going to tell him as a miracle story for the rest of his. And that's a funny space to be in, to realize that on the one hand, this is so me. And on the other, it's really not about me. It really was never about me. And every moment of terror was focused around him. And, again, I speak to women who are going through this, and part of the tragedy is I want to hold my baby, but part of it is like my baby needs me. It needs its mommy, and it's meant to be happy, and it's meant to be safe, and it's not meant to have pins pricked into it and needles every 2 seconds, and,
I think you're both going through the story.
Yeah.
You both have just a different part of the story.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But you also have to give yourself that space.
Yeah.
That you also are going through a huge challenge. And when you got home, did it all come crashing down once everything was suddenly peaceful and he wasn't on wires? And
no, it was just very, very normal.
The hormones?
It was just very, I think that's another thing which I say to women who are, again, every sick baby is a different story.
Yeah, definitely.
But for people who are going through what I've been through, which is like these situations, I say to them, like, before you know it, and it's so hard to even remember this, but before you know it, you're going to just be making dinner for your kids while your baby's asleep in the rocking chair next door. And it's just like nothing happened.
It's hard for them to envision.
It's so hard for them. And then they'll call me 3 weeks later. They were like, you were right. You were right. We're home and we're just doing dinner time. And the baby's part of the family. And it's, I think that it's amazing how quickly, we know this, how quickly things can settle down after something challenging and painful and difficult. And he just became part of the family.
Wow.
Recently my daughter was cleaning through her box of all her special things, my 11-year-old, and she found all the poems that she had written while he was in hospital. And she was like, Mommy, we have to throw this away. It's so embarrassing. And I said, why? It's so special. She's like, no, it's just so awkward and so embarrassing. We have to throw it away. And I was like, you have to keep it because it's not just yours. It's also his.
You have to show it to him when he's older.
One day,
sure.
Exactly.
Wow.
Like when they're like literally killing each other and fighting, be like, I wrote you these poems. I actually did love you once.
Exactly, yeah. There were several organizations that were absolutely incredible that brought in an art therapist to be with my kids and just extra meals and extra help. And it was so incredible to get that hug and that support from people.
What did you tell your other children?
I told them that our baby was having heart surgery. I know other people do different things.
During that 10 weeks, then they knew.
During the 10 weeks, I told him that he'd have to stay in hospital and have a surgery.
So they knew the baby wasn't going to come home straight away when Mommy goes in?
Yes, I told them straight away. And I also told them that I was scared and worried, but the doctors weren't.
Okay.
So they understood that I said, this is very hard for me and I feel, very emotional. And at the same time, it's not life-threatening in the sense that the doctors know what they're doing and they're not worried and they're not scared. So they could understand. I'm all for children really, being honest with children and giving them the context to figure out what their emotions should be. On the day that he had his surgery, for example, we organized for my little girls that were not so little to do a bracha party with their friends. I didn't want them to think that to say Tehillim and cry and daven. I wanted it to be this is also going to be, this is a mazel tov. Exactly. This baby's going to get better.
Yeah, like a positive.
Exactly. Exactly. A very
clever. So
they brought lots of different, the head teacher organized it because I was in hospital, but they brought lots of different snacks and they all made a bracha for him for a refuah. So it was not like a crazy, scary, terrifying thing, but a scary thing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to help us and the doctors would help us and we'd come out the other end.
Did they ever ask you any questions that you had to really think before you answered?
No. I think that if you're honest and upfront, then what's there to You know, what's the challenge? They knew exactly what we were going through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, well, that is quite a journey. And now the baby's 2. Now he's 2 years old.
But look, I think that everybody, as I said before, I work as a Yoetzet Halacha, which is that I help women with matters pertaining to fertility and women's health. I work with the Rabbanim and lots of the organizations in the community, the doctors in the community, and everybody's story of motherhood is different, and everybody's challenges are different. And there's definitely, you know, you guys are providing an incredible service in helping people feel like there are people whose stories resonate with them. And there's people whose stories are so radically different that this, you know, won't even touch what they've been through, what they're going through. And that's all okay, because we each have our own stories.
What I find with a lot of the feedback that we're getting is that someone could be listening to one of the episodes that has nothing connected to it's just completely not connected to their life, that challenge. But there's something that the woman who's saying the story is saying that resonates with them so deeply, and it literally, they tell us it changed their life.
They'll apply how that lady got through that challenge to their own challenge.
Yeah.
And even though someone might not be going through, you know, we hope no one should have to go through such a really, really difficult challenge like you did. But something that you say that they're going through, their own personal challenge, could really resonate with them.
Well, I'm happy for you to give my number to people. I know lots of people don't say that, but I actually say that. But I advise people and help people. And it's always nice to speak to, you know, sometimes when you're dealing with some of these issues, there's like what the doctor's saying, what halacha saying, and what your husband's saying, and as we've spoken a little bit about this, and it feels like there's so many voices. So sometimes it's nice to speak to somebody who has a sense of all, not that I'm an expert in anything, but just has a good sense of, you know, the halachic perspective. I am a woman, the medical, that just to be able to talk to somebody who can at least signpost you in the right direction, so you don't feel overwhelmed by the, you know, myriad of voices and opinions that you're hearing, which I think is also helpful. So feel free to pass on my number to anybody who asks.
That's so nice. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much, and Hatzlacha with your Aliyah move.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode on Spotlight. If you are affected by any of the challenges we have discussed, then please visit www.mtom.org.uk/podcast for guidance on where to find help.
Do you also have a story to share? Be in touch if you'd also like to be a lifeline for others by sharing and empowering women across the world. Podcasts at mtom.org.uk.